All right, welcome to Tech Updates number 4. This is the video version, and I'm going to go over the written version here. If you want to get that, you can go over to my Substack and sign up for it, and also put a link to it in the description of the video. All right, so update number 4. So this week is actually a double bonus points, whatever you want to call it. I was too busy to record last week, so you get 2 weeks worth of updates. All right, so we'll go back and do last week. So last week, what was I researching and learning? I was working on a list of solutions, basically just researching what's cool stuff I can put in Docker containers in my home labs. And I had started, and some of the things I came across on my list were Image, Kuma Uptime, Open Speed Test, and some others. And then I actually did a fair amount of those. I'll get to that in a minute. Other things I wrote down to look up in the future was maybe re-architect where I store my N8N and Cloudflare Docker containers, maybe move those over to my TrueNAS box. I might do that, I might not. I may move my Ollama from my local service to a Docker container, but actually now that I think about it, I won't do that because this local box has the NVIDIA 3060 card and I need that to do the number crunching. And then I've got a list of more Docker stuff to do research on in the future. Moretta, Post-its, the Home Assistant, and actually Home Assistant I decided I'm not going to do. It looks really cool, but I've got like one outlet and one light bulb, so I don't have enough automation stuff to really tinker around with. So maybe in 6 months I'll get around to playing with that again. And then Paperless NGX is one that sounds kind of cool. It's a solution where you can scan in photos of important papers or legal documents and then have a nice, easy searchable database and way to find them. No specific commands that I thought were super awesome to try and remember. What did I do last week that I built and stuff? I got the Open Speed Test set up in Docker container, so that's cool. I've got just speed tests, and I can go check how's my bandwidth going on at home right now. I got Kuma Uptime installed and configured, and monitoring. It says for all 12 Docker containers across 3 machines. I think as of the end of this week, it's probably 15 containers because I've done a couple more things. But I've got Kuma Uptime running, and so I've got it set up to message me on Discord, and it actually was very useful. I was at work the other day and I got an alert and like, hey, something's offline, and I was like, I messaged somebody at home, be like, hey, did anybody touch my computer? And so I got that resolved real quick, so very handy. Next thing I did was I got Nginx Proxy Manager installed, and this is actually probably one of the coolest things I did all week. Super handy. It set up a reverse proxy, and then I added internal DNS names inside of my AdGuard DNS server. And then, so all of the things I'm running in my home lab, whether that's like Image or Open Speed Test or N8N or whatever, instead of going to 192.168.101.55. .3005, whatever it is, the big long IP address for local stuff. Now I've got those mapped with internal DNS records to like photos.mydomainname or openspeedtest.mydomainname. And so they've got domain names, and then those all map back over to the Nginx Proxy Manager server. And then I've got a wildcard SSL cert from Let's Encrypt installed there. And so now it forces all of them to HTTPS, and they're all secured, and I get no warnings, pop-ups, and having to click through all that stuff on self-hosted stuff in the home lab. So that is very cool. Another cool thing that related to that is I have them bookmarked kind of, so like here in my home lab. Oh, it's not going to show it on the camera. Anyways, I've got them all bookmarked by their domain names, but then I've also got a folder and have them bookmarked via the old way via IP address. And then I've also got TwinGate Zero Trust networking set up, so when I'm remote and away from my home lab, I can just turn on my TwinGate connector, and then I'm connected to my home network, and then I can access them via the IP address saved in my bookmarks in the browser. And so, but in essence, my home lab is available anywhere I go. And so when I'm at home, I can access it via the nice fancy names, and when I'm remote, I can access it via the IP addresses over my Zero Trust network, VPN overlay stuff. And so it's just really cool, and it makes it really easy and accessible, and I can do what I want. If I have an idea, I can just jump on my lab and my network and do whatever I want. So that was the cool part about the Nginx Proxy Manager. That was a big, cool infrastructure one. I moved TrueNAS off of living on port 80 and 443 so that the Nginx proxy manager could have 443 for reverse proxy and SSL. So that just made it easier. And I just updated my internal bookmarks and my Heimdall dashboard website links. So everything is, all the bookmarks are updated, and then the reverse proxy works quite well. I installed Image Photo Server in a Docker container, and then basically that turned into my 3 to 5 day project of uploading photos. And I've got all my photos uploaded to it, and then I've got about half of the ones on my phone backed up and synced to it, and then it's errored out, and I haven't looked at it in a day or two. Why it only did about half of the 4,000 or 5,000 photos, I don't know. And then I got an account set up for my wife, and I've been going through all the old external hard drives and backups of her photos and getting those added into her account. And then I'll get that set up on her phone as well, and basically get everyone doing photo backups into Image, which is just like Google Photos from back in the day. It's very nice. It can do all kinds of cool stuff: location tagging, people tagging, folders sharing, albums, all that kind of cool stuff. It finds duplicates really well, and you can delete the duplicates. So a ton of nice features. And then I like having all our photos backed up in one spot, and they're on my TrueNAS scale box, which has got ZFS RAID across multiple hard drives. So now I'm not putting my hopes and dreams of all our family photos on one, like old external hard drive and hoping that this doesn't die. So that's cool. Mistakes. I tried to drag and drop 50,000 files at one time into that, and that kind of overloaded the web browser on the file server, and it just kind of pooped itself. So, but I figured that out. So that was last week. All right, this week, researching and learning, adding. So a lot of times at the beginning of the week, I'll start writing down, hey, this is what I want to look at this week. And then sometimes I'll usually end up, by the time I get to the improvements, I'll have finished and done them. I was on researching adding Light LLM proxy, and that was from this video here. And I already had OpenWebUI, but the Light LLM, I'll talk more about that later. So I've been still researching and learning about personal AI infrastructure with Daniel Miessler. That stuff's really cool. It's probably the second time I've went through that whole hour-long video. And I'm learning and working all different kinds of bits and pieces and concepts that are inside of that framework and working my way up to that. I'm still doing research on Claude Code and stuff and using that locally. Future research to do. I was doing some stuff with Docker and MCP, and a lot of videos people use Docker Desktop, and that adds in a lot of tools for like MCP gateway, and that adds in authentication, security, API keys and stuff, kind of all nice and easy. Or also learning to do the stuff manually just in the command line, and then when to use this way and when to use that way. Just multiple different ways to do it, and just understanding all the concepts in the Docker stuff. No specific commands that I wrote down off the top of my head, although I did make some more aliases, and I forgot to write those down. I do like a lot of aliases. Let me check my aliases real quick. Alias. Yeah, I don't see it, so my thing is on a different box. All right, improvements. What did I build and do this week? I added the OpenAI API to my local OpenWebUI. So when I'm in this here, OpenWebUI, I could switch from my local ones, which were like Llama and Quinn and stuff, and I could switch to ChatGPT, whatever, 4.0 or whatever, like that. And so that's cool. I did set up some command line stuff, some aliases for pbcopy and pbpaste. I had to use WL Clipboard and aliases for that, for Arch Linux versus pbcopy is an old Mac OS thing. And it was a little different than some of the videos I found on it because I'm on Wayland and KDE versus X11. So, but you can do it and it works. It's awesome. It's handy for piping stuff into the keyboard from the command line and then pasting it into your AI LLM when you're going back and forth and having your AI help you debug stuff. I got Claude Desktop installed from the AUR. This was actually a pain and took way longer. I'd run all kinds of stuff from the AUR all the time on Arch, but this one had all kinds of library dependencies, and the package wasn't updating the library, and the library was its own separate package, and that just took me a long time to whittle my way through error messages and figure that out. But we got it. And so now I've got Claude Desktop installed, so I can run that as a separate application versus a separate tab type thing. So that's cool. I did get Lite LLM set up in a Docker container, and then a Lite LLM Postgres container because it needs a database backend for some of the features that it has. But that's really cool, and that's what I finished last night. And what that allows me to do is Lite LLM, it becomes my API gateway, and in there I go and configure, and I put in my API keys for Gemini, for Grok, for Claude, for ChatGPT, and anything else I want to add. And all my APIs live there in that gateway. And then I create a virtual key or API token, and then I take that over to my open LLM. And then so when I'm over here now, and I've selected 3 or 4 specific models from each one. So I've got ChatGPT models, I've got Claude, Sonnet, and Opus and Haiku models, I've got Grok models, and I've got Gemini models, and then I've got local models I'm running on Ollama with my graphics card. And so I can jump in between all of those different models in one nice web interface. So that is pretty cool. I'm looking forward to playing with that. Yeah, I got the keys in there. So that's what those last 3 bullets are. All right, and then finally, the mistake for this week and what we learned and struggled and fumbled our way through was I was trying to install Lite LLM on my small server, and that is just an old little firewall box that I repurposed, and it's just a Ubuntu server box, and it has some VPN connectors on it and a LAMP stack on it for like website dev playground, and so it's just a nice little box I can do stuff on. Anyways, I went to install the Docker container for Lite LLM on it, and it took a while to figure out that it's too old of a box to do it. It has an Atom 64-bit processor from 2012, and the Docker container was written much newer and was trying to do specific commands that the CPU literally couldn't handle. And so this is what it says. It just says, yeah, the container trying to execute your CPU instructions that it doesn't understand. I kept getting this illegal instruction code 132. And that took a long time to figure out. So, but figured it out, and I got it moved over to the other box, and it works. So that is all the tech updates for the last 2 weeks. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.